thank you for joining our webinar today. My name is Helen Woodward and I'm an advisor for Zen Educate and very happy to be chairing and hosting this session today. Our webinar today is on outstanding curricula, primary curriculum planning and the new Ofsted inspection framework. I'm hosting on behalf of Zen Educate, who are an ethical alternative to recruitment agencies, a social enterprise and Crown Services supplier. So today we're welcoming colleagues from across the UK, lots of you actually, so thank you for joining us. Our format today will be some introductions to the panel, followed by each panel member responding to our initial questions when we established the webinar, sharing their insights and knowledge from their area of expertise. We've had lots and lots of questions sent in by participants, so thank you so much for that. We've distilled them as far as we could into some of the kind of key and recurring themes. If you have a question, please type it in the Q&A box. We may not get through all of them today, but we will do our best. And if you've got any questions or comments about the actual session or follow up, then please add that in the chat box as you go along. That would be great. Thank you. Okay, so our panel today, we have Mike Tonge, Janet Carroll and Danielle Broadbent joining us. Mike Tonge is the CEO for Prestolee Multi-Academy Trust and a member of the Executive Steering Group for the Greater Manchester Learning Partnership. Prestolee has a teaching school and a skit and the trust has 5 schools now. Just realised actually that the teaching school things have changed, Mike, so apologies for that. I've not updated that. Gone. My apologies. Janet, you're a senior curriculum advisor for Cornerstones Education and a leading primary curriculum company based in South Yorkshire. And you've got over 15 years experience, including 9 as a deputy head and a literacy lead in South London. And you're currently co-chair of governors in a London primary school. So welcome to both of you.
Hi.
And also Danielle, thank you for joining us, Danielle. Danielle is the principal of the Ferns Primary Academy in Bolton, and you had a recent successful Ofsted inspection in the summer, so we're very keen to hear from you. And the school received praise from Ofsted for your ambitious and well thought out curriculum, which offers all pupils a wide range of opportunities. So welcome as well to the webinar, Danielle. We're going to begin with Mike, and we're very interested to know, Mike, the philosophy that sits behind the 2021-22 Ofsted inspection framework. So do start there and tell us about that.
Okay, so just to say, I'm not here representing Ofsted or to be a part of the Ofsted machinery, and as Helen always says, I'm not here to defend it, I'm here to help explain it. I suppose the first question that I'm going to ask everyone to think about just for a second while I talk is, what does it mean to be educated? What does it mean to learn something? And I think Ofsted's central tenet, because the quality of education is the thing that everybody's really hung up about, is this sense of what does it actually mean to be educated? What does it mean to learn? And what impact does that have on a child's future prospects and their social mobility? So regardless of the context of your school, the situation you find yourself in, children have a better opportunity to be socially mobile if they study the entire range and depth of the national curriculum. And before anybody says there's been a global pandemic, I know there's been a global pandemic. Ofsted know there's been a global pandemic. But we also know that the national curriculum has been around since 2014. So it should be in place and it should be running, and there should be some narrative around how the pandemic has hit that. So what Ofsted are looking for, I think, in terms of your deliberate choices about how you say to yourself, I am going to distill 3,000 years of knowledge and understanding. I'm going to set out the aims and objectives that I think children will most need to know for their future prosperity and for their future success. And that's what we're going to turn into our curriculum. And actually, the idea being that you pinpoint very clearly the knowledge that you have deliberately decided to pass on to the next generation. Think about the iteration of that curriculum. If you want children to be socially mobile, to be successful, to be engaged, you must conceive the curriculum, you must design and deliver the curriculum, and someone must experience that curriculum. So the question that's being asked at the centre of that is, have you designed your curriculum? Do children experience it in a positive way? And does it help them to become educated and learn more, however you define it, so that children have the best opportunities in life to be socially mobile? And have you taken those component parts of what your big aim philosophy is? Has that been broken down into something that's realistic? So you hear schools talk about, as a school, our aim is pathways to the future. What does that actually mean? How does that impact on curriculum design? What difference does it make to a child's life and opportunities as they move forward? And Ofsted rightly come in at this point and say, have you really thought about this? Is it making a difference? Do children become educated? Do they know the things they should know as set out in the national curriculum? And are they developing the skills that you want them to develop over time? So learning is defined as an alteration in long-term memory. If nothing has been altered, then nothing has been learned. And you see a lot of children who experience a curriculum but don't remember and learn it. And I think that is part of the philosophy that sits behind that, which is if children know and remember more, they'll be more able to succeed as we go forward. Thanks, Helen.
So what is the process of the 2021-22 Ofsted inspection framework? How does it work when you actually go into a school?
If you think about what that quality of education means, and you think about, it's a very simple process in many respects. Actually, they're just asking some questions, and it may not feel like it in time. Ofsted are a very professional organisation. People get millions and millions of pounds of public money, and it's right that we know how that's being spent and it's making a difference. So going back to what's the process is we will come in, we will ask you, how has the school moved forward? What have you done to improve the school? What are your big aims and objectives? What would success look like for your children? Have you mapped it out specifically? Have you really clearly said, this is what good geography looks like in our school? This is what good art looks like in our school. These are the points at which we would expect children to be able to mark or measure progress as they go. And then we'll talk to children. So what we're looking for is we'll go, leaders, top vision. What does that mean for you? Middle leaders, you're leading art. What does great art look like in your school? Can you show me in your progression map how that's working for you? Let's go into some classes and see whether the planned curriculum is being taught. And let's go into some books and see if the planned curriculum is being delivered. But you can't tell whether it's being learnt by going into a lesson or looking at a book. So actually, let's ask some children if the things you say they should know and remember, they actually do know and remember at this point. And if not, then let's have another conversation and see what we're doing about it. And that's the process of judging the quality of education in a nutshell. But remember, when we go in to do those deep dives, we're not looking specifically at geography. Yes, we are looking at geography. We're not looking specifically at art, which we are looking at art. But we look at those two subjects in detail and say, is the way this is planned, delivered, experienced, and assessed typical? And then we'll assume that the rest of the curriculum is designed in the same way and delivered in the same way. And that's where we'll get to a systemic improvement process within the school.
Okay, so that's helpful. And I think, the way you're breaking it down, Mike, I think is really helpful for us to understand how to prepare and plan. And I know we're going to cover some more of that later, but I think this is really helpful. So let's move on into thinking about preparation. What should we consider when we're preparing for an inspection? And I'm kind of conscious that sometimes comes with a whole pile of anxiety for people. So there's perhaps something about how you manage that anxiety.
The thing is that what people get hung up on with Ofsted is systems. Are your systems in place? Ofsted are not officers of compliance. They're looking to see whether education as planned is being delivered and taught. One of the real problems with schools, and I don't mean this disrespectfully, is they get hung up on assessment data or the system that's in place. And actually what really matters is that people are having a really detailed, educationally focused conversation about what actually matters to children. So the best way to prepare for it is, first of all, have a good curriculum in place. The best way to prepare for it is to talk about the education aspects of it. What does this mean to us? What does it mean to be educated here? What does it mean to learn? And then to think, what does that look like in reality? So when mapping it out, really clearly saying, this is what we think a great artist is going to look like at our school. This is all the challenges and barriers that we have. How do we get from there to there? Well, let's really carefully map it out and refine it, but let's along the way really identify the knowledge and skills children should have. We don't want reams of data, don't produce that. We don't want massive amounts of planning, don't produce that. We don't want people doing huge amounts of monitoring, don't do that. Just constantly talk about what matters to children, what difference is what we're doing making, and have we really clearly defined it? Or are we still talking in nebulous terms about PE? Well, you know, it's great that they're outside in the cold, you know, and I don't mean that disrespectfully. It's just, have you really thought about the curriculum as it is delivered? Is it specific enough? And it's that constant education. So what people have missed with the framework is that it's changed from the CIF, the Common Inspection Framework, to the EIF, the Education Inspection Framework, because it is a conversation from start to finish. We're less hung up on SEF and school development planning. We just want to talk to people.
That's really helpful to understand. That's really helpful to understand. Just kind of picking up on that that last point about we really want to talk with people. I know when we talk about reviewing the catch-up curriculum as well, this is something that Ofsted have made a number of statements about. So can you tell us about what is Ofsted's role in reviewing the catch-up curriculum and education recovery?
There is no doubt that there's a significant amount of public money going into catch-up funding and catch-up support. Now, like anything else, all that Ofsted will be interested in is, have you identified effectively the barriers to your school and its success going forward? Have you looked at all the tools available to you to make sure that you overcome those barriers, of which catch-up funding, national tutoring programme, they are tools available to school. And then looking and saying, well, if you tell me that there are problems and you're not accessing the tools, then are you really effectively trying to make progress with people over time? And are the decisions you're making having impact on your desired outcomes to make sure that children are educated? And if not, why not? And if it's not effective, why is it not effective? So it's more about judging the impact and the deliberate decisions that schools have made, because there are a range of tools out there. We'd want you to have looked at them, we'd want you to have considered them, and we'd want you to have used them if that's what you need in your school, and to have judged the impact of them.
Okay, so there's a question there about, are you most effectively using the resources available to you? Yeah,
absolutely.
Okay, Mike, thank you very much. That's been a really helpful introduction to the webinar and looking at the new Ofsted inspection framework. I'm going to move us on now to Janet. And Janet, you're going to be talking with us about what an outstanding curriculum looks like. So over to you, Janet.
Hi, yeah, obviously I think I've probably got far too much to say. I've looked at my notes. I will be scribbling through notes as I go, so I'll try and keep it coherent. I'm probably going to obviously repeat lots of what Mike's just mentioned about, because naturally he's talking about what makes a good or outstanding curriculum. And I think the minute you use the term outstanding, you can't help but link that to Ofsted. So I could have just looked at the paragraph, couldn't I? I could just end it there. So there's a paragraph in the Ofsted framework, have a look. But I actually deliberately didn't look. And I thought, no, I'm not going to look again. I've not looked at it for a little while. I just wanted to think about what it meant to me as an ex-deputy head, as an educator. And I think one of the key things I wanted to get across today, and it's from my experience of working with lots and lots of schools, is that I don't think you'll ever have an outstanding curriculum in your setting if your head teacher or your leaders are not passionate about curriculum and actively involved. I work with hundreds and hundreds of schools and thousands over the years. I've been with Cornerstones now, and it still shocks me, especially since the changes in the framework, of sessions when I first talked to schools about considering using us to support their curriculum delivery, and the head teacher's not involved. And even when schools are then invested with us and I run training and the head teacher doesn't attend. And I always think to myself, how can you possibly hope to have an outstanding curriculum if your head teacher, your leaders are not passionate about that at the very core of what they believe? Like Mike said, they have to have a philosophy, a belief that they have a vision and values attached to your setting, your school. And if you don't have that, I don't think you can ever truly produce an outstanding curriculum. Well, you probably can, but you might kill half your teachers in the delivery of it. But I think it has to be led from the top. one of my saddest experiences of my the previous Ofsted inspection framework. I used to work with a head teacher who was absolutely passionate about curriculum, is where I got it from. And in the previous inspection framework, because of course it had a different focus, but this is an actual quote, the lead inspector, when we tried to draw in our passion about the curriculum, how important we felt it was, that she actually said the curriculum is neither here nor there. And to me, that was the saddest indictment of that, where inspection was at that point. I think it, as Mike said, it shifted massively, and how now is education inspection framework, curriculum is at the centre of it. But I think if you'd have asked me again what I thought an outstanding curriculum was in my, when I was teaching, it was about being engaging, it's about child-led, it was about inquiry. And I still think they have a massive part to play in making outstanding curriculum. But I think we all recognise that your primary education is about preparing you for the next stage of learning. And you can only do that if you are clear and precise about what you teach and how you're building those knowledge and skills in the right order. There's still an absolutely massive part for experiences, for real life application of the knowledge and skills. But I think it's about now being really clear about the key ingredients of that order and the building blocks and how you prepare children. Again, making subject disciplines, again, very specific, even at primary level. So I thought about the key ingredients that I think you'd have to do if you were about to sit down and try and write your outstanding curriculum for your school. One of those is, I think Mike's alluded to as well, those larger concepts or big ideas. You've got to start from the national curriculum. It's not changed since 2014, but they are in there. They take a bit of a wrangle to get out. They're not clearly, those bigger concepts are not identified for you. The endpoints are, but you've got to have a little a piece of work about what are the concepts that you feel you can map through all the subject disciplines. So they might be things like investigation or materials or creativity. But once you've identified those, you also need to make sure that teachers are aware of their part that they play in delivering those. So their smaller elements that they teach will deliver the longer term learning of those broader concepts for children. And you also have to then, once you've got your bigger ideas, broken it down into smaller concepts, then you need to have a clearly identified progression for each year group, as Mike said, about what it looks like for that year group. So for example, your big idea might be that we all learn across time in the curriculum about humankind. And an aspect of that might be we learn about the human form. Then you've got to decide, well, where do we learn about the human form? We might learn about it in PE, we might learn about it in art, we might learn about it in science. And what does that look like in those subject disciplines in terms of humankind and the human form for year 3 as they go through their year? And for that child, what did they learn about it when they're in reception, and what did they learn about it and what they're going to learn about it in year 6? So that mapping has to be really precise, but start from those bigger ideas. You have to have a clear pedagogical approach. I think that's really important. We've got one where we believe in the engage, develop, innovate, express. So any style of learning, whether it be a lesson or a long-term piece of learning, has to have something that hooks the brain in and starts those connections in the brain and sets up the schema. Develop it by actually explicitly teaching knowledge and skills and making sure understanding is developed. Offering opportunities for children to innovate, to show what they know, to use and apply, whether that be to create and make something, whether it's to write a piece, or whether it to be answer a test, something where they can show you that they now know stuff that you've expected them to know. And also an opportunity to express their learning and share with others. Again, pandemic had a massive impact on that opportunity, but we've got to plan for that for the future to come back to normal, because when children share their learning with other than their peer group, then they raise their own expectations, and that ability to share either verbally or present, again, prepares them in a stronger sense for bigger, learning later on in life, but also embeds their own understanding of what they've learned. You might need to stop me, Helen, because I've got loads on each of these slides. Where am I?
I was about to say, I'm going to have to move you on, Janet.
Okay. I'm just going to say then, rich texts, language and vocabulary acquisition, and the really massively important part of the link to the early years and how massively important that is. And if you don't have an early years in your setting, then go out and investigate one, because eventually you're going to have to make sure you know that you're building on that early years curriculum up to year 6 again. I'll just bring it back to the fact that you can have the most incredible intent written, but if it's not delivered, if it doesn't, like Mike said, if you can't go and talk to children about it, then I've just read an Ofsted report from an outstanding school that's unfortunately gone in the wrong direction, because fantastic intent documents, but their teachers didn't have the subject knowledge to back that up. And that brings me on to another point, which I'll finish on this slide, and then I promise I'll move on. And that's about quality CPD for your teachers, about making sure they've got the subject disciplines. And of course, in primary, we're under enormous pressure to be, masters of multidisciplinary approach. And of course, you have to, as senior leaders, make sure your teachers are receiving the right quality, whether that's about learning about cognitive load, about neuroscience, whether it's about the disciplines themselves. But without a quality investment in your staff, you're not going to get an outstanding curriculum.
Okay. And Janet, I'm going to have to say to you, you've got 3 minutes now to work through the rest of your presentation this morning.
Okay, not enough time. Right, okay, I'll try and keep it.
There might be some time at the end, but let's see.
That's
so I'm
fine.
just conscious that we've got other contributors.
That's fine. So basically, this section obviously about curriculum 2022. So this is more specifically about what we've written as an organisation, as we're all ex-senior leaders and teachers, to try and support schools to do exactly that. Why is it called 2022? I think that's just really about the legacy that it's come from. I first got involved with Cornerstones curriculum materials in 2011. We wrote projects, as you'd expect, for the 2014 curriculum when it was all about broad and balanced. In 2019, we moved into something called knowledge-rich projects, again, a reflection of the move towards being clear about what knowledge was being expected to be learned. And then what we've done is taken those as the basis for a fully sequenced curriculum that we're calling Curriculum 22, where the knowledge-rich projects are at the core of that. Just to go into more detail about our big ideas, our concepts that underpin this connected curriculum. So say something like we have an idea of nature, significance, or place in space as one of our 3 of our concepts. We've got those clearly defined. So nature we define as the complexities and independence of plant and animal species. Significance about understanding why people, places, and events and inventions matter. And then things like place and space, understanding visual, social, cultural, environmental aspects. So it's about the rigor that you apply to those bigger concepts, not just saying, oh yeah, we all teach nature, or we all teach place and space. It's about clearly sequencing that and showing where it goes into the different elements of the curriculum. So curriculum 2022 for a teacher offers you termly projects based on history, geography, and history again. And they have, within those have sequenced lessons. So you know that you're building, each lesson has an identified skill and knowledge. And each lesson also, at the click of a button, can show you which larger concept it links to. So you're always building backwards and being able to view electronically how your lesson today on teeth is linked to the bigger concept of nature that they learned about plants and parts of functions of nature in reception. So there's lots of electronic tools to allow you to see your connections, as well as obviously high quality resources, knowledge organisers, things that help reduce cognitive load for children, things that help you identify your clear endpoints for that particular theme. So as a teacher, it gives lots and lots of support. It is subject specific, but where there are clearly defined links. So for example, there's a year 5 theme called Dynamic Dynasties, which is about the Shang dynasty in China. It's a national curriculum requirement that you do an in-depth study of an ancient civilization. And a mini project linked to that is called Toshi, which is about a specific area of Chinese art. So we have managed to continue those cross-curricular discipline, make them cross-curricular subject to subject links. But if I was to go into Shang dynasties electronically, I'd find sequence lessons. If I was going to Toshi as an art and design project, I'd find fully sequenced knowledge and skill-based lessons. So it's about breaking all that down for people so that they can see how it all builds. As a leader, it allows me to design bespoke curriculum. So I can take our starting points and I can add my own project. So it's not just our content you can put in there, you can put your own content there as you'd expect, because what you want to do is develop from our starting point your school curriculum, because school context is so massively important. It's not just about saying, oh, we teach this preset curriculum. It's about saying, this is our starting point, and this is how we've developed this to reflect our needs, our context, our setting. So it's a really kind of, I would finish on, I've missed loads of what I wanted to say out, but I'll finish on saying that basically when I train staff to use our materials, the one thing I say to them all the time is, you are not teacher. We work with nearly 2,000 schools. If you're out there listening and you've got it, you're not teaching the Cornerstones curriculum. You are using the Cornerstones materials and our new online platform, Curriculum Maestro, to help you develop your own outstanding curriculum. But we just give you a massive leg up to get there.
Okay, That's very helpful. Thank you, Janet. And just while Danielle is preparing, Mike, I'm just going to check in with you about the pedagogical approach, which goes engage, develop, innovate, express. How well would that support someone preparing for that conversation that you were talking about just earlier?
I think it would help them really well, because I think that process, one of the challenges for the way the curriculum is delivered is that quite often children pass through a curriculum and they don't remember it, and they don't recall it because they don't conceive all of the different stages of it. So just a warning that the inadequate judgment says that children pass through a disconnected series of activity, and quite often you'll see curricula which is designed very badly, because what they do is they go, we're doing the Egyptians, we're doing something about pyramids, we might do Joseph, maybe we'll do something about, pharaohs and Osiris, but none of that connects because they've not really considered that process, which is, well, what does that knowledge give you? What does that lead to in terms of knowledge and understanding? What does it mean to be educated in history? And I think that pathway that Janet describes there was really effective at delivering and ensuring that that's embedded.
That's really helpful. Thank you. Danielle, we're going to move on to you, and you're going to talk with us about the fairly recent experience you've had of your inspection. So over to you, Danielle.
Yeah, so when I got the slides at first and I saw it was 4 minutes to talk about my Ofsted experience, I did giggle to myself, to be fair, because I could probably talk about it for a lot longer than that. So I've tried to keep things in a bit of a nutshell, really. And it's been really lovely to hear Mike and Janet talk about the curriculum, because a lot of what I was going to say is based on the philosophies and the pedagogy around what they've just explained. So we'll start right at the beginning, really, with the telephone call. So telephone call came in at around 10:30. Weirdly enough, while I was sat on a course that was called Preparing for Ofsted. So I'm not sure whether that was, but it came in around 10:30. And that initial telephone conversation lasted for about 1 hour and 50 minutes for us. It was very much based on intent. So what the Ofsted inspector at that point wanted to know was, what was the intent of our curriculum, a little bit about context of our school, where we thought we had made improvements since our last Ofsted inspection. But what Mike said before about the fact that it had gone from a CIF to an EIF was really, really clear. Some of the things from my previous experience of Ofsteds, they didn't even want to know about. They genuinely wanted to know, what is your academy, what is your school doing to prepare children for the next stage in their education or the next stage in their lives. So when the phone call came through, there were a couple of things that we'd done in preparation, and it wasn't about mocksteds and it wasn't about preparing things beforehand as such, but it was about just feeling confident on the telephone. So at the time, myself and the executive head sat together, and we had the telephone on loudspeaker, and we really worked together. And it was very much, whilst one person was answering a question, the other person was triangulating information from our curriculum document, our curriculum position statement, and also from the handbook. And we're really picking out things that we knew we wanted to lead the inspector into their lines of inquiry on day 2. And we really took what I keep saying is the bull by the horns. It's our school, it's our academy, and we really want to show you what a child gets in our academy. Now, I would say that 60% of that initial phone call was around reading. And it was around early reading, and then the rest of it was around curriculum and curriculum development and where we were up to in terms of our curriculum. I talked about triangulating that preparation material, really, and that was key for me. It was my first Ofsted inspection as a head teacher. I had been the head teacher here since February, went into COVID in March, and then got the phone call in June. So very quickly into my career, although I have been here for 15 years and I've been the deputy for a number of years. So I do know the school inside out. But that key information that we triangulated during that phone call was really, really key for us, because what we did then was able to manipulate the timetable for what was going to come on day 1. So we were really able to say to the inspector, you've asked us questions about reading, so we think you should see X, Y, and Z first. And we were only giving suggestions at that point. Of course, the inspector was going to tell us what she was going to do, but we felt that we really could work with her to lead her down a path of where we wanted her to see first. Once we'd had the phone call, a lot of the information that she'd asked for, we'd already pre-organised. And because time is really, really precious for the for the team, a lot of things that they used to spend times doing, like single central record and checking things from CPOMs, now is just things that they already want prepared, and they just want to look at that paper. They don't really want to sit and go through those things. Their main aim is around education, and around getting in those classrooms, talking to the children, talking to the middle leaders, and getting a real feel for your school. In terms of the portal, the Ofsted portal, so you get a link to the Ofsted portal where everything comes on, and that was really key for us. What do we want this Ofsted inspector to see before she arrives at the academy tomorrow? So let's bombard her. She might not look at it, but actually she might just open up our curriculum document and have a little read of what our intent is. So we just uploaded everything, nothing that nothing special, things that we use on a day-to-day basis in school, we just uploaded for her to have a look at. And she was really honest when she got here. She said, some of the things I have looked at and some I just haven't had time to look at, but I have looked at some. And that gave her a bit of background information around what CPD staff had in terms of our curriculum intent and implementation, what our curriculum was based on, the context of our children and how we were using cultural capital, etc. I made a really, really brave decision, and I set up the Ofsted inspector in my office, which is the real heart space of the school. I set her up in there, and I made sure that I prepared lots and lots of books, information, children's learning that went around the room so that she could really clearly see lots of amazing practice and learning without even stepping out of the office. So that was really good. In terms of day one, a significant amount of that time was spent on reading. And I would say that for us, reading was the most intense deep dive. So it literally, gone are the days when they used to do all of the single central record first. By 8:30, we were already part of a reading deep dive. So it was straight in, straight through the door. I don't even think, quick cup of coffee and straight in. And the reading deep dive was really about come and show me, how do your children leave your academy being able to read with a real clear progression in reading, being confident readers and with a love of reading. And we really did get the opportunity to showcase what we do. So she went and looked at all of the phonics sessions going on. A leader could go with her at that point, and could really kind of talk her through what was happening. So she wanted to watch phonics lessons, catch-up phonics lessons. She then wanted to see some children who had passed phonics and not passed phonics, and where they were up to in terms of what reading books they were taking, what phonics groups they were in. And what was really interesting, and this was something that we weren't overly prepared for, was she wanted to watch a teacher read with a child. She didn't read with any children. So she sat back and she wanted the adult to read with the child, and she watched them read with them. And she was looking there obviously for phonetically decodable books and the teaching of reading.
I'm going to have to jump in. I'm so sorry, because we've got so much to get through. And what you're telling us is really interesting. And I know Ros has just jumped the slides onto the staff briefing. You've talked a lot about how you led through that inspection process, which is really helpful for us. We're just interested to the staff briefing. I'm interested to know when you did that briefing.
So we did the briefing before lunchtime. So we'd already prepared briefing notes of what needed to be said in that briefing to staff to make them feel confident. And we've done a lot of preparation beforehand with leaders. I'm very much here that we are all leaders, whether that's a leader of the classroom, a leader of a subject, a leader of, and to make staff feel really empowered through the inspection. It was really important that they knew what was going on and that nothing was hidden from them. So we did that briefing relatively quickly, really, before lunchtime. And during that, we went through just the information you can see on the screen there, really, but just about building the team up, what we knew so far, what we knew the deep dives were going to be, who needed to prepare, etc.
Okay, so I think you prepared that briefing following the phone call then, is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Okay. Danielle, what I'm going to ask, because what I'm going to ask is whether you'd be happy to share some of these documents with webinar participants kind of following the webinar, because I think some people would find them really interesting. Would that be okay?
Absolutely, yeah, that's absolutely fine. I can share with you all of the preparation documents. The key one for me would be the Ofsted plan. So as soon as that phone call came out, you can see it on the right hand side of your screen there, but as soon as the Ofsted telephone was answered, we already had a plan of who was speaking to the inspector, and at the same time we had teams of people that were already preparing while we were on that phone call. Amazing. So just making sure that all the portals were open and that the parent questionnaires were going out and timetabling and etc. was ready. So that was real key for us.
Okay, and I've just seen somebody in the chat go, woohoo, yes please, that would be amazing. So yeah, thank you so much. We've got lots of responses there. So that's great. Yeah, and Rosie's saying the documents can be shared. Okay, I'm going to move us on to some of the questions that have come in from people. And I have to say, we had so many questions. But here's where we're going to start. Are there any specific requirements related to substantive and disciplinary knowledge? And Janet, I know you've said that you'll talk about that. And actually, I think leading an outstanding curriculum, I'm hoping that we've already covered that. But perhaps, Janet, you can answer question A for us.
Yes, again, I don't think there's enough time in the few minutes that we have. It's such a massive area to discuss substantive and declarative knowledge, and there's lots of different terms out there. And I've looked, into it for various angles, and I think it's about identify. So in our curriculum, for example, we have core knowledge and specific knowledge. So again, it's about things that are substantive stuff. Is almost like the stuff that to be true. So like the Treaty of Versailles happened here, and the World War II dates as such, etc., or a tectonic plate is a certain aspect of geography that is known to be true. Mm-hmm. And I think the disciplinary knowledge is often more applicable in terms of academic discussion at secondary level. But what we have to do at primary, which is what I've already referred to briefly, is make children aware that these disciplines, these subject domains exist. Because the dangers we've seen in the past is that when children learn thematically, which still I think again, I think that question's coming up, but children can learn thematic because they can make their own connections to things. But what we have to do as educators is get them to recognise that history is a subject discipline of its own, and investigation in history might look different to investigation in science, for example, so that when they go on to their next stage of education, they are ready to recognise that within that disciplinary domain, what we've taught them at primary isn't everything there is to learn about that disciplinary domain, for example, and there's more, and that opinions within that disciplinary domain might differ. You might look at bias in various parts of literacy, and you might look at bias in various parts of history. But at primary level, I think we're building their disciplinary knowledge where they recognise which have interconnections, and that's difficult to do. They're only up to age 11, so it's about building those blocks carefully, right, as I said earlier, from EYFS, and making sure that their understanding of the world. They know links to geography later in life, as and as they go through school, and the subject disciplines separate out. And obviously, as they go on to secondary, those disciplines become far more distinct again. And then if they go on to higher education, that's about the real in-depth domain. So yeah, I think it's a really massive topic, but I think again, it's about CPD for staff, making sure they're aware of the difference of the disciplines, and that like Mike was saying earlier, you don't just do the same thing in investigation. We'll all investigate and it all links across because it's the same word. In different disciplines, it'll have different meanings. But for primary children, recognising that there are separate subjects they're learning about, but they can be linked where it works and when it makes sense.
Thank you, Janet. Ros, can we move on to the next group of questions? Because we've got a group of questions now. How do we usefully prepare for deep dives? And Daniel, I know you've already talked about the reading deep dive. Advice about the articulation of choices during deep dives. Now, Mike, I know this is something that you and I have talked about before. And also a question about how small settings can manage deep dives well. So, Mike, I'm going to start with you and then ask Danielle if you'd like to contribute as well to these. So, Mike, over to you for some of these. Oh, we can't hear you, Mike. Oh, there we are. There you are.
I think you prepare for a deep dive by being really clear about the process by which that curriculum has been devised. And one of the main problems with schools in terms of their monitoring is it's not sophisticated enough. So I'm going to try and answer all three of those questions in this point, which is far too often people judge compliance with a curriculum rather than the impact of the curriculum. So they prepare by checking the planning. Well, I could plan to look like Tom Cruise next week. I could watch all the Mission Impossible movies, but it's not going to happen. In terms of how you plan that out doesn't really matter in terms of monitoring it. It doesn't matter that you've planned it, but it doesn't matter whether you continually monitor it. It doesn't matter whether you continually look at the books or continually look in the lessons. You prepare for it by saying, this is what we thought we were trying to do. And I'm going to ask a lot of children about whether or not it's making a difference to them and whether they know and remember more over time. And they're really clear about how their learning has added up to bigger conceptual understanding. So I'm going to go through that process myself regularly. It takes half an hour. I'm going to have a look at what they should have learnt. I'm going to ask them if they had. And then I'm going to be able to sort of look for that articulation of choice, because I will then know which are my strongest subjects, i.e. the ones that children know and remember more about. And then I can say to Ofsted, I'm pretty confident when you come and talk to our children, they'll know a lot about history, not just facts and knowledge, but they'll understand it. So I'd like you to have a look at that. Less confident about the way we do PE, but that's about my own personal validation of my self-assessment. I'd like you to have a look at that and see the progress and the procession of how we're improving that over time. In terms of managing that within small schools, inspectors are used to working in small schools. They are very understanding. You should be completely honest and say, there are literally 3 of us. I teach all day. These are the subjects that we've got available, and this is all you can see. And I think they are generally understanding. But remember, and this is a real problem for heads and people, when you walk past an NQT's room, they shiver with fear. But when Ofsted arrive, we immediately go along with whatever they tell us to do. Be bold. Just say, no, we haven't got the capacity to do that. This is what we're doing. You can see this.
Okay, that's really helpful.
Can I just jump in as well and just say, I think that's right. I think it's about selling your strengths, isn't it, as well, and saying this is what we do well. I'm sure Danielle, it sounds like you did that brilliantly, but it is about saying this is a success in our school and we're working on X, Y, and Z. It's about the honesty, isn't it, about you recognizing where you are in your journey.
Yeah, I think for us, just to add to that there, I think it was twofold for us in terms of our implementation. So it was around that systemic approach to each individual subject, but it was also about us saying about to the inspectors, we've got a real strategic timeline in terms of developing curriculum areas. So if you want to come and see geography and history that have been worked on for the last 3 years, you will see that they are outstanding. Whereas if you want to come and see, for instance, music, or it might be slightly further down the line, but this is the timeline of how we're going to get there and what the skills the children are going to end up with.
Okay. Would anyone like to comment on the question of very small settings? I think particularly when you've got mixed age group classes, because we've had a few questions about that.
Again, it's very difficult. The smallest one I've ever inspected was 20, and 20 children, that is, not 20 staff, because that would be quite large. But it is about going in and being realistic about what you can show the inspector and being absolutely honest with them from day one and saying, look, we are teaching, you'll be able to see reading because we're doing that. You'll see our curriculum progression, because remember, it's not about the delivery. So it's not about observing teaching. It's about, has the school carefully thought about the sequential development of knowledge? Can you just go and show me where you're up to with phonics teaching now? Can you go and show me where you're up to with reading now? It's less about lesson observations and work scrutinies and so on. That's part of it, but it's about you being confident and saying, this is how we're moving our curriculum forward, and then just going and seeing it. So the management of that is hard. You'll find your inspector constantly sitting in and out, but also you should say to your inspector, for people's well-being, I don't want you to see that, and I don't want you to see it. Most inspectors are really reasonable. And if you just say to them, this is what I need, they fall into it because they want to help. Okay. Well, they want to judge, but they also want to be, no one wants to get complained about. That's also something they're considering.
That's worth remembering, isn't it, actually? Okay, and spoken by somebody who does know Mike, I know. And actually, Mike, I'm just going to mention, because I know that you, from your trust, you have a range of training opportunities for people as well. So I know you have a 3-day training programme on the new Ofsted inspection framework, and you also have some 2 and 1 day training sessions for middle leaders and on reading deep dives.
Yeah, so we do quite a range of training. So we do a 3-day Ofsted inspection course, which goes through all aspects of the framework, so you really understand it by the time you finish. But we recognise that reading is something very particular. So we have a 1-day training course on what a reading deep dive would look like, what you need to think about, and a couple of days for middle leaders. We roll that out nationally. We're just in the process of rolling that out nationally. So if anybody is interested in it, Helen, would the best way to do that to go through you and just say,
we can send your contact details out in the post-webinar information, and just, and we've got people asking on the chat, actually, this is great, can we have a recording, can we have the materials? The answer to all of those things is absolutely yes, you can. So Mike, we can send some of your information out with that as well.
That'd be great.
Webinar. I think that's.
Can I just make a comment on small mixed age schools as well? I think it's like you're saying, Mike, it's about knowing how many cycles you need for the children to travel through in order to get that progression through the curriculum. And we work with loads and loads of very tiny schools, mixed age schools, and I didn't get a chance to, our online platform is called Curricula Maestro, and that has a specific element to help mixed age schools look at that progression electronically so that they can help design a curriculum that's effective over time, which is tricky when you've got to have 4 cycles to get through the curriculum.
Yeah, thank you, Janet, thank you. Okay, we're doing really well, team, and I know we've had a lot to get through. I'm going to take just a few minutes at the end here just to thank everybody for their time today. I haven't seen any live questions that have come in from anybody, so if anybody's got an urgent live question, what I'm going to say is actually just pop it in the chat, because we've got just a minute there, literally. And I've also got a question just here about mapping progression and the best way to show this. And I don't know if whether Janet or Mike would just like to comment on that.
There are 3 aspects to mapping progression if you're doing it really carefully. And remember, when you're sitting down, you are explaining to the inspector in the same way you should be able to explain to your staff and to your children and to your parents. So when you're mapping, I think as Janet was saying, start with what connected big conceptual understanding looks like and start to work back from that. Because only when you've decided what it is you want to achieve can you decide. Because actually, one of the biggest and most important questions around curriculum is what not to cover and what's not important to you, because you have to abandon that to give you enough space to take all those little bits of interconnected knowledge and learning and bring them together to concepts. So being really clear about what success looks like, what it looks like in year 4, what it looks like in year 2, what it looks like in year 1. So everybody's clear of the journey they play. Because if you can't describe that with a document in front of you very clearly, then chances are your team don't understand it and your children aren't progressing.
Okay, thanks, Mike. And I'm just going to ask Mike if you can just take 1 minute to respond to that question by Coral Hubby. What if the curriculum leader is a different person? How would Ofsted view that?
I don't think Ofsted worry about, sorry, what was the question again? Is a different person?
Yeah.
So the curriculum lead is the curriculum lead. It doesn't matter who's doing it. What we would expect is the head teacher to be setting strategic direction, but we would expect the curriculum leader to be talking to us about the curriculum. Because actually, if I'm entirely honest, no one cares who's doing it in the background. What we care about is it making a difference to children? If there's a curriculum team, great. And as Danielle was saying earlier on, as many people in that phone call conversation as possible, because this is about the whole team effort. And many heads, when we've had inspections, have said, well, I felt I was hardly involved in it because you talk to our curriculum leader, our middle leaders, our reading leaders, our teachers, our pupils, and you didn't talk to me that much. Because actually what we care about is delivery and impact. So does it matter if the head teacher is heavily involved? That'd be great. Does it matter if the curriculum lead is a different person? No, it doesn't. What matters, are you making a difference to children?
Right, really clear message there. Thank you very much, Mike. Okay, as we mentioned right at the beginning, as an Educate, we are a social enterprise, and we've been supporting lots of schools and teaching assistants to begin roles in January, actually, because we're talking with lots of people who are currently planning ahead and recognising their staffing challenges and opportunities. So if you're based in London, Manchester or Birmingham, or I should say very recently, Leeds, because we're just about to start working in Leeds because we've been successful with a preferred supplier tender for there. So if you've got staffing needs that you know are coming up in January, do get in touch with us now, because we're really happy to talk with you about that. We are a recognised social enterprise, and we've so far saved schools over £3 million in the last few years in wasted agency fees, whilst paying teachers and teaching assistants more than many other agencies. We've also started offering, we're also an approved tuition provider for the National Tutoring Programme, which we're quite thrilled about, actually, and it's been so exciting to start seeing our staff go out and be able to support children and young people who have missed out during the pandemic due to not having IT at home or illness and those kinds of things. So we're really happy to say that we're now an approved tuition provider. Because we've followed very closely the EEF research, we understand that the most effective tuition, by 2 times actually, is to have qualified teachers where possible, working with children in a face-to-face context. And that's very much where our tuition is based. All our tutors go through our small group tuition training programme as well, which has been developed in-house. And we're following, as I say, the research by EF and the Saturn Trust. And our tutors will work really closely with you in schools to make sure that the focus of the learning is relevant for that child, that pupil, and also links up with what's happening in the classrooms as well. So it leaves me, I think, to say thank you to our panel. Thank you to our panel. I've just noticed we've got literally a few minutes and we've still got questions coming in. So I'm going to just push over the question that says, are there any tips for mixed age group progression? And I'm going to ask Danielle and Mike about that, actually. Danielle, have you got any mixed age group classes in your school?
We haven't, no. We're a 2-form entry school, but we have got schools in the trust that have got mixed age classes. Okay. Obviously, we develop the curriculum across the trust. I think it was touched upon before by Janet, I think, around just making sure that the cycles and ensuring that, you know, where you've got a cycle A and a cycle B and that progression through those cycles. But I can't give you experience from my own school, I'm afraid.
Okay, no, that's fine. Mike, have you got any inspection experience of mixed age group classes and what you think the particular challenges and opportunities
is
are?
Where endpoints are clearly defined and how the cycles lead to endpoints. If you've got mixed age classes, children are still with you for the same number of years as they are in any other school. They just experience the curriculum at different points and different levels. It is extremely important, particularly with mixed age classes, to be assessing the impact of the work that you do by asking children if they know and remember the work over time, as opposed to whether they have simply passed through a curriculum. So clearly defining how those cycles move learning on and having those end points really. What schools love to do is spreadsheets about how many children have done this, how many children did this lesson, how many children we think are age related in history and all of that. Don't ever do that. What's the point of any of that? Just ask children if they know and remember stuff. And is the cycle that you're using ensuring that by the time children will get to the end of year 6, that they've reached the goals you want them to get to? And then really carefully work back with those cycles. And remember, the Egyptians, particular artists, particular aspects of DT, they are just the vehicle through which the learning and skills is deployed. So actually, you can have some variety in that, because what matters is the learning and the concepts and the specific subject knowledge you have defined those children need to get. How you get there can vary from year to year. What matters is you get there.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Thank you.
Can I just say there, just on in the same as what Mike's just said there? So from experience for us, do we have any data for subject disciplines? Absolutely not. Was I asked for any data? Absolutely not. How did Ofsted know that my children here were learning more and remembering more? Just by talking to them. It literally was just conversations of, can you talk me through your history through, and my children were able to say things like, well, we're just learning about medicines through time in year 5, and I know that my knowledge of the Fire of London in year 1 helped me with that because I know it eradicated a disease, just as an example. But it was just about what the children could tell them. That's all it was. They didn't want to see anything on paper at all.
Interesting. Okay. So just in the last couple of minutes, I know we alluded to it earlier, but for very understandable reasons, people do, there's a lot of anxiety about Ofsted. I only have to look at my social posts every morning and Twitter to kind of see the anxiety that's around. Danielle, you've led a team recently through the inspection process. Mike, you as well as being a CEO, you're also a lead inspector. We've heard that you can't speak for Ofsted, but just one thing from each of you perhaps on how do you help people to manage their anxiety and feel grounded and kind of calm during that process? Danielle, for you first, please.
I think it's about leading the team to understand that Ofsted are not there to come in and completely rip your school apart. They're not. They're there as in a supportive. I've never felt so supported in terms of our Ofsted this time. And it was very much about us showcasing and showing that inspector what we were doing for our children. Of course, they're there to judge. That's the whole point of Ofsted.
Sure.
But it was about staff really understanding that this is our time to just show them in a snapshot what we do for our children. We know our children get a very, very good education day in, day out. We're here in the building day in, day out. We just need to show them what we do. And, for us, that was a really lovely experience that was then accredited at the end with an absolutely glowing letter that we were very happy about.
Lovely. Thank you and congratulations.
Thank you.
Mike, what one comment from you about how people can feel calm and stable during that process?
Be confident, take control. They are in your school. You know your school better than they do. They only know what you tell them. They only see what you show them. Manage it and keep in touch with them all the time. They should be keeping in touch with you going, is everything all right? Is everyone okay? How are you feeling? And if at any point you feel it's spiraling, you say to them, is there any more information which I can give you which would add value to your judgment? And have you got any concerns at this point? And can I show you anything else? Well, just, they are there and to judge you. So you give them everything you want. As much as you can, manage that. If they've got a framework to pass through, make sure you know the framework.
Okay. And that's a really helpful question there, actually. Is there anything else I can give you that will add value to your judgment? Really good advice there. Thank you so much to all our panelists today, to Janet, Danielle and Mike. Thanks for your preparation and your time this morning. And thank you to everybody who's joined our webinar. And absolutely, we will be sending the materials out and we very much hope to see you at our next webinar in January, which we'll let you know about before too long. Thanks so much, everybody. Have a good day.